Today we're on lesson 7. If you don't have a copy of it, it is at the back. It is the significance of textual variants. This is part 1. Doesn't mean we're going to cover all of part 1 today. I'm not planning on covering all of part 1 today. But there are 2 parts to this because if you notice that there are 2 sections on this page. There are trivial variants and substantial variants which have no consequence to the text. And that would mean that there's likely a third one, which is a substantial variant that has significant consequence to the text. And so I kept that for part 2. And so I wasn't going to try to squeeze all of that into one lesson if I wanted to get them onto one page back and front. So that's why you have 2 lessons. Is a part 1 and a part 2. Now, I have a question that I'd like you to consider. If someone told you that there were 200,000 errors in the New Testament, what would you say?
Can we trust them?
Can we? All right, that's a valid question. Okay, there's 200,000 errors in the New Testament. Can you trust the New Testament to be telling you what it says? Is there any other questions you might have?
What are the errors?
All right, a good question would be, okay, you say there are 200,000 errors in the New Testament. Please show me them. It's very easy on the internet, especially today, to make a claim. You can make a claim about anything. I saw Bigfoot this morning, and Gord gave me this, really? But I know Gord would challenge me on that. Yeah, there you go. There you go. But I mean, like I said, I could post that, and when you're on social media, the clickbait that's out there, you have these outlandish claims that people make, so you can click it, and they can spread either false information or have a video that's completely on a different topic whatsoever.
Today with the AI.
Well, that's what yeah.
I sent Jeff a video one day, and if you look at it closely, you can see it's fake, but you got to look closely. Yeah.
Oh, I have a sermon on that next year, Lord willing, on AI, because of the dangers of AI and how that affects, like as far as our witnessing of the truth, because 5%
error with regards to AI.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There. Well, the way AI is, the videos are looking so real, and in fact, in my video editor now, I can have certain AI tools. Say I make a mistake, and I wanted to fix the mistake without re-recording. I can use AI to do that, and I could re-record, and then they have a feature in there where they can extend the video to match what I say. And I'm like, that's a little creepy to me, but it's how you can edit. But that, of course, if you can use it to edit to fix a mistake, you can use it just to create anything you want. And that will be the one time in a lesson I do in a couple of weeks on that. It'll be the one time I actually hook up the speakers to this computer, because I'm going to want to play a video, and I'm going to want to show people what it actually looks like in relation to someone out there trying to teach the truth. Where you can put me up there and make me say anything, but how do you know it's real? But anyway, so the question though, that where we got off on that tangent was, okay, show me the errors, prove it, because we can make any claim. Are there any other questions? I mean, what type of errors are you talking about? What is the meaning? What are you counting as an error? Because we hear errors and we often go right to the extreme. Oh, it's lying. It's a lie. If it is an error, it is a lie. We do this when we talk about teaching the truth, the gospel, versus teaching false doctrine. We sometimes will say they are in error. And so errors can be falsities, as in someone's telling you a lie, a bald-faced lie, versus someone who made a mistake. someone coming along and says Moses made the ark. Well, not maybe. Maybe they really thought Moses did make the ark. Like I'm talking about Noah's ark, not the Ark of the Covenant. But more than likely, that's a mistake. That they just misspoke. I know I misspeak. Gord comes and tells me that sometimes. That you said this or you said that. I'm not complaining about it. Because if I do misspeak, well, I at least know someone's listening.
Well, in my defense, I am a troubleshooter, and attention to detail matters.
No, I wasn't complaining about it, Gord. I wasn't. Well, but I mean, I wasn't complaining about it because it is good that people listen to what is being said because maybe I didn't make a mistake. Gord's never come up to me and said, Jeremy, you taught error there. It's always, you said this verse versus that, or you said that person versus that, whatever. And the screen said something. But he never came up to me and said, Jeremy, you absolutely taught error today. And I would hope he never says that. Because if he did, that would be troubling because everyone else probably heard the same thing too. And if it is error, that's really bad. But whether or not I said the wrong name of someone or had the wrong verse up there, a wrong chapter or wrong verse or didn't extend it, those are mistakes. And so we have to be able to understand the difference. So 200,000 though sounds like a large number. Large number. And certainly would be. But from one point of view, it could be said that we have 200,000 scribal errors in the manuscript. But it is misleading and untrue to say that there are 200,000 errors in the text of the New Testament. So there is a difference between scribal errors versus errors. What do you think the difference by adding just that one word changes in how you think about it?
Because one could be like human error versus an intentional error.
Yeah, it goes to, again, how we think about things. If you say there are 200,000 errors, bad. 200,000 scribal errors, that still sounds like a lot. But that now focuses, okay, these are not likely errors in doctrine. These are likely errors in spelling, errors in word usage, or things like that. People who come along and do textual criticism, which is what Lesson 6 was about, comparing translations of the Bible, comparing any text, really, they're not going to come along and say that those are errors. They're going to call them textual variants. Variant means vary, differences. Gord.
So, I think that you could still have an error, but if the context is correct, then it's not really an error that you need to worry about.
We talked about some of those last week, yeah. Like as far as whether or not...
It could be just translation. You have to add words to make the meaning mean what the original was trying to put across.
Well, yeah, and we talked about that a little last week in our lesson where we have to be careful with those types because then we are interpreting into the text to make sure we've interpreted properly. But those types of variants, we determined every one of the variants we talked about didn't make a difference as to what the meaning of the text was. And so we did that with Matthew 11:19. We talked about whether it was the children, wisdom will be known by her children, or wisdom will be known by her works. And Jeff, I think, was the one who brought up that wisdom is not a person. And so we have to be talking figuratively there. And so children can't be real children either. What does children represent? Well, it represents works. And so there is a textual variant in Matthew 11 between manuscripts that come from the English Standard Version and manuscripts which produce the English Standard Version versus manuscripts that produce the New King James Version. Some will have works there, some will have children there. Luke always has children. And so that's why Luke always has children, or Luke has works. Luke has one of the other in all translations. And so we had discussed why there was a textual variant there, and it was most likely to harmonize with Luke, so that it created this textual variant, whereas it likely was what the variant was probably the original. And so we have that, but textual critics don't come and say that there are 200,000 errors. They will say that there are 200,000 textual variants, because not every variant is created equal. The large number, though, that 200,000, it's a lot. Sounds like a lot. That's a big number. Like, there are 100,000 people who live in Scarborough Agincourt in just this section from Kennedy to Vic Park down to the 401 up to Steele. 100,000. So you double the number of people in here, and that's a lot of people. Like, wow, that's a small city. 200,000 sounds like a big number.
What is the percentage?
Yeah, we'll get to that. So 200,000 sounds like a lot. Tim, in China, 200,000 people a lot in a city? What would you call that in China? A small town. Canada, that's a small city. Like, go to where my mom lives in St. Catharines, 132,000. Oh, that's a village in China. But I mean, like, as far as why is it small? Because the cities are huge. And it's all relative to what you're talking about. And we also have to consider this. What is necessary if you're going to have texts with variants in them, with differences in them? What is necessary about the number of texts that you have? If you increase the number of texts, what should you expect? Probably more variants. If you have more copies, more variants. And we have 5,300 manuscripts of the New Testament. There have been many more, but we just don't have them. 5,300. Okay? And there are 200,000 textual variants. But we also have to understand how they're counted as well. Like that's another question, is how are you counting errors? What do you count as an error, or what do you count as a variant? For example, if one slight variant were to occur in 4,000 different manuscripts, that's 4,000 variants. So in other words, if you had a spelling of a name, for instance, and you had 10 manuscripts and they all spelled the name differently, you're like, wow, that's a pretty bad name. But you have names that are spelled differently. Some might be translated. So in other words, you take Jose and you translate it Joseph. Well, if you have one that says Jose, one that says Joseph, that's a variant. It's two variants, and so two errors. But if you spelled Jose, if you didn't know how Jose was spelled and you spelled it with an H instead of a J, all right, now you have three variants. And you maybe spelled it with two E's. Female name might spell Josie with two E's. You have four variants. So spelling, when you're saying, okay, if any change counts as a variant, and it does, then that 200,000 number can get up pretty quickly. And so Gord asked about a percentage. We're talking 99, greater than 99% of the scriptures are the same. You know that from reading the scriptures. If you were to pick up a New King James Version and an ESV version, which come from two different text traditions, right? One's going to come from the Western text, and one's coming, I think, from the Alexandrian text, or I forget which one. But anyway, there are two textual traditions. And you were to pick it up and just read Genesis chapter 1. Maybe you only read the first 5 verses of Genesis 1. Back to back. You're going to come away knowing the same exact thing. And the words are going to be pretty similar. And you can pick up another chapter, all right? Randomly pick up another chapter. Go to the book of Psalms, and you might have a little bit different readings there, because the book of Psalms has there are a lot more differences in Psalms than there are in other passages of Scripture, because the Psalms, there are fewer manuscripts of the Psalms. And so there are some, when you get varied readings, lesser amounts of varied readings, then you have some varied readings. But the point is, we know from picking up the Scriptures, if I ask Naomi to read a verse, and I ask Gord to read a verse, they're going to read from 2 different translations, and we're going to get the same thing out of those passages. Now, sometimes it matters because I'm looking for a word and Naomi's version doesn't have it. But that's on me, not the text. It should be noted, though, that we arrive at the large number of textual variants because we have so many copies. We would have less variants if we had less copies. But we also would not be as certain as if we had the original. So in other words, if I have 5,000 copies of a book versus 2 copies of a book, which is better, to have 5,000 or 2? If I had 5,000 copies of a book or 2 copies of a book, which is better? The same book. If I wanted to store it in my house, maybe it would be better to have 2. But if I just wanted to know, okay, do I have the original text that the author wrote? It's better to have 5,000 copies of it, because that way I can take a look. All right, is this first edition, second edition, third edition? All right, if sometimes third editions come with multiple copies because they found errors in it, and so you could take a look in the front cover, or what year was this published? You could follow it along. We do that in our books today. And so the fact that there are 200,000 should not alarm us. A, because we have so many copies. B, because not all variants are created equal. And they're counting variants differently than the way maybe we would. And so we shouldn't be alarmed at that. But variants do exist. And so let's see in our remaining time today as to how they affect the text. The significance of these variants. Because we can't just say, oh, well, there's 200,000 and it doesn't matter. We have to prove it that it doesn't matter. Because it would be just like saying that there are 200,000 errors, just coming along and saying they don't matter is equally as wrong. So the great majority of variant readings are going to be what are classified as trivial. What does the word trivial mean? Minuscule, minor. Have you heard the game Trivial Pursuit? It's a game of trivia, of lesser known knowledge. It's minor. These are minor variants, and some of them even are so minute that we don't even know they exist because our translators translate them out. In other words, there are some, if you were able to read the Greek text, there would be some variants in the letters of a word, or the accents that go on a word, or the tense of a word, that when it's translated in English, we don't have that tense, or we don't use that tense the same way. And so when we get it into our English, we won't even notice that there was a Greek variant. Because our English translators will all deal with it the same way. If you've ever learned French, you understand that there are more tenses than past, present, and future. Yes, Gordon. We often even in English, speak in the past, the present, and the future. But then we know that there are many more tenses than that. We don't learn them in English. We just accept that there are. But when you learn French, or you learn German, or you learn, like Norwegian probably has that too, where there's different spellings of the words based on the different tenses that you have. So I remember I hated this part of French where you had like the perfect tense and the future tense and the past tense, and it all had different spellings of the same word. Whereas to make an English word past tense, sometimes you have to change the spelling, but sometimes you just have to add a word. I went to the store. All right, I'm going to the store, or I'm at the store.
But
like I
if
said,
you're fluent in that language
Yes.
from birth,
yeah,
it's like second nature. You wouldn't
Yeah.
even make that observation.
no, and that's true. That's true. But even in English, there are different tenses. We just don't notice we're using them. It's not that English has gotten lazy. English isn't lazy. We just don't learn them because it's just how we talk. And so these are sometimes these trivial variants we won't even know exist in the Greek text because our English ones don't show it. But sometimes we do. In the last lesson, we looked at Matthew 11:19. I'm going to get a verse, so we have some verses that we were going to read for our Bible class. So let's get Matthew 11. I'd like us to read verses 10 to 23. We'll start with Annie over here. I always start with Naomi, so we'll start with Annie. We'll do 2 verses each. Matthew 11, 10 to 23. Go Annie, then Sandy and Tim, and across to Barbara.
For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my cousin before your face, who will prepare your way before you. Assuredly, I said to you, among this one, there has not risen one greater than John the Baptist. But he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than John.
From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing, and forceful men laid hold of it. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John.
(14 and 15), Sandy. Okay, and then come to Barbara, verse 16 and 17. Okay, and Leister. Come up to Jeff. We're going to go to verse 23.
Then he began to rebuke the cities in which most of his mighty works had been done, because they did not repent. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes.
And then Sandra, verse 22 and 23.
I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon when the day of judgment come for you. And you, Capernaum, who are exalted to heaven, will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Sodom, they would have been able to this day.
Okay. those who just walked in, we're in Matthew 11. And so, if we were to open to that passage, we have our 14 verses. That would be on one page in one of the Greek texts. Just what we just read. There are 9 variant readings in what we just read. And you probably saw some of them in your scriptures, depending on who has read. Now, what versions were you reading from in English? Is it the NIV?
Me?
Yeah. Okay. And Barbara, which version do you have? New International. Okay. And Gord, you have the New King James.
Yes.
You have the ESV. You saw some changes in readings. What were those changes? Like what did you see? What types of changes did you see between what was read, Jeff?
A lot of them are just different words that say the same thing.
No.
You just chose to use a different word.
Okay. What types of words would we call them when we have 2 words that mean the same thing? Synonyms. Are Gord remembered his English class.
I remember going 51%.
There you go. But synonyms. If I were to use a synonym, if Gord said one thing and Annie said another, and they said the same thing, but they used 2 different words, and they wrote down, that would be a textual variant, because it's a different word. But did it change the text? No, because it means the same thing. Now, sometimes changing the word would change the meaning, but not always. If you say floor and you say ground, well, you have I'm on the ground, or sometimes you go to the floor of the forest. You hear that forest floor, and that's another word for the ground. But it wouldn't change the meaning. Gord.
Yeah, I think it listed version, verse 19, justified by your works or something.
Yeah.
And I have heard children.
Yeah, that's the variant we discussed last week. Yeah.
It wasn't the word, it was more of a phrase.
Yeah.
Multiple words.
Yeah.
But it still meant the same.
It meant the same because, this is what we talked about last week, from 19, justified by her children. And this was when Jeff was saying wisdom doesn't have children. So it must be speaking symbolically there. And actually children is probably the original. I think let me go to Luke, because this is going to bug me as to which. Yeah, Luke has works, and Matthew has children. But if you go to other versions, it will change it to match what Luke says. Well, the original reading was likely the variant reading, because we tend to harmonize when we copy. If something is said differently, so in other words, if Gord and Annie said something differently, and I had the 2 copies, and I wanted to make my copy, well, which one am I going to pick? Well, I'm going to probably pick one of those words, but if I come along and they were supposed to say exactly the same thing, and I chose one of those words, well, which one was original? You have to sort of guess. And so, a lot of the times, you're going to see an omission of a word, an addition of a word. You might have the word for, F-O-R, added. You might have the in certain places. And at no point, though, did anyone say that their text reading was different than my text reading in the way it's understood. In other words, when I read through Matthew 19 or Matthew 11, we all understand the same thing, even if we had slightly different words. And that is going to be the vast majority of textual variants in the New Testament. Is sometimes you might see Christ Jesus versus Jesus Christ. That's 2 variants, because there are 2 different words that are in a different order. And so you have Jesus Christ or Christ Jesus. Does it make a difference? No. Jesus the King or King Jesus. That's what that means. Christ means king or anointed one. Jesus the anointed or the anointed Jesus. A lot of times people probably put Christ first or last because they think it's a title or a name. Like sometimes I think it's a name. That his last name was Christ, as if that was his last name. It's not. And some will put it before because they think, well, it's a title, king. We say King Charles. We don't say Charles King. We say King Charles. So Christ Jesus, King Jesus. But those are variants. But they don't change the meaning. Whether you put it before or after, it's the same man you're talking about. Other examples are found in Acts 18, verse 24. I don't know if we'll actually have any variants here, but I'm going to get ESV, which will be Naomi, and I get Gord to get the New King James of Acts 18, verse 24. You won't probably have a variant. I'm not looking for a variant in word here. This will be different. All right, Naomi, you go first.
Now a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures.
Okay, and then Gord.
Now a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus.
Okay, how's Apollos spelled in that passage?
2 L's.
2 P. Is 1 P, 2 L's?
Yeah.
Okay, so in English, we fixed that variant. However, in some of the Greek manuscripts, it is Apollos, the way it's spelled there. Sometimes it's Apelles, Apelles. Sometimes it's Apollonius. Apollonius sort of reminds me of Shakespeare. And so you sometimes will have those variants. John 1:28 might be one where we actually get a change. I'm going to come across to Tim. You're reading the NIV. John chapter 1, verse 28. Nellie, what version are you reading from?
James.
All right, so I'll get you to get John 1:28 as well. We might get a change here. It depends. John 1:28.
This all happened at Bethany.
So, I'm going to get Tim first, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This all happened at Bethany on the other side of the Jordan, where John was baptizing.
Okay, now you get John 1:28.
These things were done in Bethabara, beyond the Jordan, when John was baptizing.
What's the difference?
Bethabara.
Or
Bethany.
Bethany. Is it Bethabara or Bethany? And there's debate over that because we don't know where the city is. If it's a lot of times people are going to call it Bethany beyond the Jordan because we know there's another Bethany. There's a Bethany close to Jerusalem, and so
Jordan identifies the area.
and Jordan identifies the area. And so if you have two cities that both have the same name, if it was just one city of that name, you don't have to say where it is. But if there are two cities of the same name, you have to sort of say where it is. Like when we talk about East York, York, and North York, if we just said York, that's what Toronto used to be named, we'd have a problem because we wouldn't know if we were in York, if we were in the part of Toronto known as York, whether we're in East York, whether we're in North York. You have to sort of put those identifiers in because there's more than one York. Well, if there's more than one Bethany, it's likelihood it is Bethany. But does it matter? No, because they knew where it was, and we don't. John 5, verse 2, sometimes we'll call it the pool of Bethzatha, the pool of Bethesda, or the pool of Bethsaida. Now, it's likely not the pool of Bethsaida, because we're in Jerusalem. But you can see how Bethesda and Bethsaida, you can have a copying mistake there. And most will translate it the pool of Bethesda. Matthew 1:18, is it the birth of Jesus Christ or the birth of Christ Jesus? You'll have different versions there. Those are what are known as trivial variants. Variants that are slight changes that make absolutely no difference to the text.